The Appalachian woods hide things best left forgotten. Old homesteads, mines, churches, cabins, structures swallowed by vines and silence. Some decay quietly, others, they don't stay quiet at all. There's a cabin along an overgrown ridge near Clay County that the locals never touch. Hunters avoid it. Hikers don't mark it on maps. The story goes that no matter how empty it stands, the cabin never sleeps. At midnight, footsteps echo across its floors. I didn't believe it, not until I stayed there myself. It was late fall, the air sharp with frost, the trees bare enough that the hills seemed skeletal. I'd been hiking all day and needed shelter from the cold. When I stumbled on the clearing, the cabin stood waiting. Roof sagging, windows black, door crooked, but still on its hinges. I should have passed it by. Something about the silence was wrong. No owls, no wind, not even the scurry of mice. Just the cabin watching. Still, the cold drove me inside. The floor groaned as I stepped in. Dust thick, cobwebs sagging, but the boards felt strangely warm underfoot. I set my pack in the corner, lit my lantern, and sat by the fireplace, though there was no wood to burn. For hours, nothing. Just the ticking of my watch and the wind outside. My eyelids grew heavy. Midnight crept close. That's when I heard it. One step, then another. Boots, heavy, pacing across the floorboards. I shot up, lantern swinging. The cabin was empty. Shadows stretched long across the walls, but no one stood among them. My heart thrashed in my chest. I whispered to myself, "It's the house settling. Just the wood, just the wind." But then the steps circled me. Slow, deliberate, pressing closer, though the boards remained bare. "Who's there?" I forced the words out, voice trembling. Silence. Then, behind me, right against my ear, another step. I spun, lantern blazing. Nothing, but the boards beneath my feet quivered as if weight pressed against them. I couldn't breathe. My pack was still in the corner. I grabbed it, bolted for the door, but the knob jammed. The wood shook under invisible weight, boots stomping hard now, rushing toward me. The lantern flickered. For a split second I saw them, footprints forming across the dust, fresh, heavy, crossing the room straight at me. I tore the door open, stumbled into the cold. The footsteps followed, pounding across the porch, then stopped. Dead still. When I looked back, the cabin stood dark again. Empty. Only the prints remained, trailing from the shadows to the doorframe. An ending where I stood. Locals say no one should stay past midnight. Some swear the steps belong to the family who built it, others to wanderers who froze on the ridge. Whoever they were, they're still walking. And if you listen closely, when the ridge wind dies down, you can hear it. Boots. Heavy. Circling. Waiting for someone to step inside again. The Appalachians are scarred with mines. Some sealed, some forgotten, some still yawning open like black mouths in the hillsides. The old-timers say the mountains don't let go of what goes inside. I heard this story from a retired foreman in Harlan County. He told it the way you'd confess a sin, voice low, eyes fixed on the table. He said one of his crew vanished underground, and the only thing they ever found was his helmet. It was the late 70s, a rainy season when the ridges wept red mud. The crew worked an abandoned shaft north of town, clearing debris for a possible reopening. They called it the Hollow Pit, a name whispered with a mix of dread and respect. That morning, one miner, young, strong, eager to prove himself, volunteered to go deeper than the rest. His headlamp cut a thin circle through the dark dust motes floating like ash in the air. The others waited near the entrance, shovels in hand, their voices echoing faintly. Minutes passed, then half an hour, too long. They called his name, no reply. Finally, the foreman sent 2 men in after him. They returned pale, saying the tunnel stretched further than expected. "It ain't right," one muttered. "The air down there's thick. Feels wrong." But they had to try. So all of them went in. The deeper they went, the colder it grew. Their lamps illuminated jagged rock, rusted timbers, and the black sheen of water dripping down the walls. At last they found something, a helmet. It lay in the dirt, lamp still burning, strap snapped clean through. But no sign of the miner. No footprints beyond, no tools, no body. Just the helmet glowing faintly in the dark. Then the sounds began. At first, faint tapping, like picks striking stone. The men froze, listening. The sound came from deeper in the shaft, steady, deliberate, but too far down to follow. Then came the voice. It was his voice, the missing miner. calling from the darkness. "Down here! Keep coming!" The men shouted back, running forward, but the tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly. No matter how fast they moved, the voice never grew closer. Always just ahead, always urging, "Down here, this way." The foreman yanked them back, shouting that it wasn't him. The tapping turned louder, echoing through the rock, until it became pounding. The air thickened, sulfur stinging their noses. One man swore he saw a figure at the edge of his lamp, a shape too tall, its eyes glowing faint like coal. They fled, helmets clattering, boots splashing through black water. When they burst into daylight again, the tunnel seemed smaller, like it had never stretched so far at all. The helmet was the only thing they carried out. The mine was sealed the next week. The company blamed unsafe conditions, but the crew knew better. The mountain had claimed one of its own. The foreman never forgot. He swore that sometimes, driving past that ridge at night, he'd hear tapping under the ground. Faint, patient. And if you roll down your window, you might hear it too. Someone still calling from deep in the hollow pit. Helmet light burning where no man should walk. The Appalachian backroads twist like veins, narrow and endless, climbing ridges where headlights vanish into fog. Locals know which ones to avoid after dark. One of them is a stretch outside Boone, North Carolina. They call it Widow's Curve. I drove it once, just once. It was late autumn, the trees stripped bare, the night so black the stars looked drowned. My tires hissed over wet asphalt, the guardrails glinting dull in the beams. Around the second bend I saw her. A woman in white. She stood on the shoulder, barefoot, dress clinging wet to her frame. Long hair hung over her face. Her hand was raised, palm outward, waving me down. I hit the brakes, heart racing. My rig groaned as it slowed, tires squealing on the slick road. She didn't move, just kept waving. I rolled the window down an inch. "Ma'am, you need help?" Nothing. I leaned closer, squinting through the rain. That's when I saw it. Her arm. It wasn't bent right. The elbow jutted backward, bones twisted under skin. She dropped her hand then, slowly pointing down the road. The air turned cold. My windshield fogged though, the defroster ran hot. I felt it then, deep in my chest. She didn't want help. She wanted me to follow. The curve ahead loomed sharp, guardrail dented from old wrecks. I pressed the gas, swerved wide to avoid her, but as my light swept the bend, she was there again, standing dead center in the lane, soaked dress plastered against her body. I slammed the wheel. The car fishtailed, gravel spitting. For a heartbeat, her face lifted, and I saw eyes as black as the pavement. Then she was gone. I pulled off shaking, headlights stabbing the trees. The road was empty. My hands ached from gripping the wheel. I forced myself to drive the rest of the way, eyes locked forward, refusing to check the mirrors. The next morning, I asked a diner waitress about it. She went pale. "You saw her? Folks say she died on that curve, car flipped in the rain." Now she waves down drivers, wants them to wreck the same way. I never took Widow's Curve again, but sometimes late at night, when rain drums on the glass, I see her in memory, standing on the shoulder, arm outstretched, bones bent wrong, pointing me toward a road I don't want to follow. The Appalachians stretch wide, ridges folding into valleys like endless waves. Out there, a man can vanish for days without anyone knowing. Hunters call it freedom, but the mountains keep their own company, and sometimes they let you hear it. This story came from a bow hunter I met outside a camp store near Hazard, Kentucky. His voice shook as he told me. He swore it was the last time he ever spent a night alone in the woods. It was early November, frost already clinging to the leaves. He set camp on a ridge where deer trails crossed, laid his bedroll under a lean-to, and let the fire burn low. By midnight, the woods had gone quiet. No owls, no coyotes, nothing. Just the crack of frozen twigs under the cooling earth. He drifted off to sleep. Then the whispers started. At first he thought it was the wind, but the sound was too close, curling around his campfire. Low voices, dozens of them, rising and falling like they were speaking just out of earshot. He sat up, bow in hand, eyes searching the tree line. Nothing moved, but the voices grew clearer, some sharp, some soft, all tangled together in a language he couldn't place. He shouted, "Who's there?" The voices stopped. For a heartbeat, the forest was still. Then, from directly behind his shelter, a single voice answered, "With us." His skin crawled. He spun, arrow notched, but the fire sputtered out. He was left in total dark, and that's when he saw them. Shapes. Dozens of pale outlines standing between the trees just beyond reach. Their heads tilted, faces blurred by shadow. Every one of them whispering again, louder, weaving words he couldn't understand. The air pressed thick, heavy with damp earth. He tried to light the lantern, but his hands shook too hard. When the flame finally caught, the shapes vanished, gone as if they'd never been there. But the ground told different. Around his camp, fresh prints circled in the frost. Dozens of barefoot impressions pressed deep into the leaves, encircling his bedroll like a ritual. At dawn, he packed fast and left. He never hunted that ridge again. When he told the locals, they only nodded. One said, "Some places you don't camp." The woods already got their own. Now, even in daylight, he swears he can hear them sometimes. Whispers at the edge of his hearing, waiting for him to sleep. And when he does sleep, he dreams of that voice, still close, still clear, with us. The Appalachian hollows are strange places. Some are rich with deer, wild turkey, and fox. Others feel like nothing grows right. But there's one hollow near Wise, Virginia, where not even the birds dare to sing. The locals call it Dead Hollow. They'll drive around it, hike past it, even cut extra miles rather than step inside once the sun dips low. I heard about it from a farmer who grew up on the ridge above. He said when he was a boy, his father caught him trying to sneak down there. His father grabbed him by the arm and said, "Don't you ever go where the woods stay quiet. That's not our place." Years later, curiosity got the better of him. One evening, he walked the ridge until he found the trail down. The first thing he noticed was the silence. No crickets, no cicadas, not even the wind in the leaves. The second was the smell. Damp earth, metallic like old blood soaked into stone. He said the deeper he walked, the heavier it felt, like the air pressed down on his chest. He lit a lantern, though the sky still glowed faint with dusk. That's when he saw them, carvings. Trees along the hollow were slashed with symbols he didn't recognize. Circles crossed with lines, hand-shaped etchings burned into the bark. Some fresh, some older than the scars of the trees themselves. Then came the sound. Not birds, not animals. A low hum, steady, like a crowd of voices chanting just out of earshot. It rose and fell in waves, though no one stood among the trees. He turned to leave. That's when he saw the figure. At the far end of the hollow, half hidden in the gloom, a tall shadow leaned against a tree. It didn't move, didn't speak, but the humming grew louder, pressing into his bones. He ran. His lantern swung wild, light flashing against the symbols. The ground seemed to grab at his boots, roots tangling, dirt shifting, as if the hollow itself wanted him to stay. When he finally stumbled out onto the ridge, the hum stopped. Just like that, silence returned. But when he looked back, the figure was still there, standing at the edge of the trees, watching. He swore to me he never went back. None of the locals do. They say whatever lives in that hollow keeps the birds away for a reason. And if you're foolish enough to step inside after dark, you don't come out at all. To this day, the old farmer says, when he dreams, he hears it. The low hum rising through the trees, pulling him back toward a place where no birds sing. The Appalachian backroads are long, and truckers know them best. Gas stations are lifelines, glowing beacons in the middle of endless black highways. But sometimes the light hides more than it reveals. This story came from a long-haul driver who swore he would never take that route through West Virginia again. It was past midnight, his fuel running low, when he spotted the glow. A gas station sat just off the bend, old but lit, fluorescent hum above the pumps, a single sign flickering open. Relieved, he pulled in. The lot was empty, not a car, not a soul. Still the lights burned steady, humming in the cold air. He climbed down, boots crunching gravel, and set the nozzle into his tank. The pump clicked alive. Numbers rolled. Behind the glass of the station's office, he saw movement. A figure. The man waved, but the figure didn't wave back. Just stood there, half hidden in the glare, watching. When the tank was full, the pump cut with a sharp click. He turned to return the nozzle and froze. The office was dark. Every light inside had gone out. The counter was empty. The shelves bare, as if no one had been there in years. The hairs on his arms rose. Slowly he stepped toward the door, curiosity wrestling fear. He cupped his hands against the glass. Inside, dust coated every surface. Cobwebs stretched across the shelves. His breath fogged the window. That's when he saw it, reflected beside him. A man, standing inches away. But when he spun around, the lot was empty. He bolted back into his rig, locking the door. His headlights cut across the pumps, the sign, the empty lot. The lights flickered. Then every bulb in the station flared bright, humming so loud it shook his mirrors. And behind the glass, the figure stood again, this time closer. Face pale, eyes hollow, mouth stretched into a silent scream. The driver slammed the gears, tearing out onto the highway. In his rearview mirror, the gas station vanished into darkness, as though it had never been lit at all. When he told the story at a diner weeks later, another trucker nodded. That station's been closed since '83. Fella died inside. They say sometimes it lights up, calls drivers in. And if you see the man behind the glass, you're already too close. The driver never went back. But every time his fuel runs low on a lonely stretch of road, he says a prayer, hoping the next glow he sees isn't the kind that remembers the dead. Deep in the Appalachians, cabins sit miles apart, hidden in the folds of the mountains. At night, the woods swallow sound. That isolation can feel peaceful, until something comes knocking. This story came from a family who stayed in a rented cabin for the summer. They never finished their stay. The cabin stood at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by thick timber. No neighbors, no signal. Just trees pressing close, their branches scratching the roof when the wind rose. For the first few nights, everything was fine. Quiet, still, almost too still. Then, one night, just past 11, there was a knock at the door. 3 sharp raps. The father grabbed a flashlight and opened it. No one, just darkness. He stepped out, shining the beam across the porch, then into the yard. Empty. Only the trees swaying, leaves hissing. He shrugged it off. Until it happened again. Every night at the same hour, the knocks came. Always 3. Always steady. On the 5th night, the family decided to wait. Lanterns turned low, curtains drawn, they sat in silence. The cabin clock ticked loud in the dark. At 11:03, the knock came. But this time, when the father cracked the curtain, he saw them. 2 children stood on the porch. A boy and a girl, maybe 8 or 9. Their clothes looked old, worn. They stared straight at the door, hands folded in front of them. Relieved, he almost opened it, until his wife hissed. Look at their eyes. Black, solid black, reflecting the lantern light like glass. The children spoke in unison, voices flat. Let us in. We're cold. The father's hand shook on the knob. The kids didn't move, didn't blink, just repeated the words. Let us in, we're cold. The family backed away. Minutes crawled. The knocking began again, softer this time, almost polite. Then, after what felt like hours, silence. At dawn, the porch was empty. But small footprints trailed in the frost, leading from the tree line to the door, and then vanishing. The family left that morning. They never returned, leaving food, clothes, everything behind. When the cabin owner checked, he found the prints too, pressed deep into the soil, ending at the door. Locals say the black-eyed children appear when the mountains want company. If you let them in, you don't come back out. The family still swears that in the dead of night, even in their new home miles away, they sometimes hear it. 3 knocks. The Appalachian Trail is more than a hike. It's a ribbon of stories, a place where the land remembers every step and every secret. Hikers talk about shelters tucked into the woods, rough cabins for rest, half forgotten in the trees. But one shelter near the Tennessee border carried a rule scratched into the wood above its door: cover the mirrors before nightfall. The story came from 2 hikers who ignored it. They reached the shelter near dusk, tired and soaked from rain. The structure was simple: wooden beams, a dirt floor, and 3 mirrors nailed to the walls. Strange already, since no other shelter had them. The glass was cloudy, cracked, but each one was draped with heavy cloth. One of the hikers laughed. "Spooky decor," he joked, tugging the edge of a covering. His partner frowned, reading the carved warning above the door. But exhaustion won. They set their packs down, lit a lantern, and let the storm rage outside. As night deepened, the first hiker pulled the cloth from one mirror. The glass stared back dimly, warped by time. Nothing unusual. He grinned. "See? Just a mirror." But then it shifted. Not his reflection, something behind him. A pale face in the dark, lips pulled into a wide grin. He spun around. No one stood there. His partner swore and covered the glass again. "Don't touch them. Just leave it." But it was too late. That night, as rain hammered the roof, they heard movement. Footsteps pacing the dirt floor, though both lay still. Whispers rose, curling around their bedrolls, voices repeating their names in thin, stretched tones. When they lit the lantern, the coverings on the mirrors were gone. All three mirrors glared back, each one reflecting figures that weren't in the room. Dozens of them, hollow-eyed, twisted faces pressing against the glass, palms smearing from the inside. The hikers fled into the storm, leaving gear behind. They ran until dawn, not stopping until they reached a ranger station. When they returned later for their packs, the shelter stood quiet, mirrors covered again. The ranger wouldn't say much. Only this: some places catch what passes through. Mirrors are doors. Better to keep them shut. To this day, hikers who know the story drape every reflective surface before sleeping on that stretch of the trail. Canteens, phones, even the glass on their watches. Because when the sun sets in those woods, not every reflection belongs to you. The Appalachians are full of campsites. Clearings worn smooth by decades of hikers, stones arranged in fire rings, places that feel almost safe. Almost. But some fires don't die when the campers leave. I heard this story from two brothers who swore they would never hike past sundown again. It started simple enough, a weekend trip deep into the Virginia stretch of the mountains. They carried light packs, set up camp in a hollow where the trees broke just enough for starlight to trickle through. By dusk, they'd gathered wood and built a fire, its sparks rising orange against the black canopy. They ate, laughed, and told stories until the flames burned low. At last they doused the fire, scattering the coals until only faint red embers glowed. With the woods silent, they zipped their bags and drifted off to sleep. But at midnight, one of the brothers woke, his eyes opened to light flickering through the fabric of the tent. He sat up, confused. The fire was burning again. Not embers, not sparks, a full blaze. He unzipped the tent, stepping into the cold. The fire roared in the stone ring, higher than before, but no wood fed it. The flames swayed and twisted as though unseen hands stirred them. His brother stumbled out beside him, face pale. "Did you relight it?" Before he could answer, the flames bent inward. Shapes formed in the fire, silhouettes of people sitting around it, heads bowed, hands raised as if warming themselves. For a moment, the brothers thought they saw faces in the flames, mouths moving in silent words. Then came the voices, low, chanting, weaving from the dark around them. Not from the fire, but from the trees. The brothers spun, flashlights shaking. Shadows shifted just beyond reach, circling their camp. The fire roared higher, sparks bursting into the night. The chanting grew louder. The figures in the flames leaned closer, their faces hollow, their eyes black as coal. The brothers bolted. Packs abandoned, they ran through the hollow, branches tearing at their arms. Behind them, the chanting followed. The fire's glow lit the trees, chasing them long after it should have faded. When they stumbled out onto the main trail, the woods went silent. Darkness swallowed the light. Only the smell of smoke clung to their clothes. A week later, a ranger found their abandoned site. Tent collapsed, gear scattered, everything coated in ash. But in the fire ring, flames still burned. Bright, hot, no wood. No fuel, just fire that wouldn't die. Every mountain town in Appalachia has a church perched high on a ridge. White clappered walls, steeple stabbing into the sky, graveyard leaning crooked in the grass. Most fall quiet when the congregation fades. But one hilltop church in western North Carolina never truly fell silent. The locals say its bell still rings, even though the doors have been locked for 50 years. I hiked up there once with a friend who swore he'd heard it. The trail wound sharp through oaks, fog clinging low, air cold enough to sting. At the top, the church stood hunched against the sky. Windows boarded, paint peeling, steeple leaning but intact. The graveyard lay scattered, stones chipped, names half swallowed by moss. We sat on the steps as dusk settled. The woods turned gray, then black. For hours, nothing but wind whispering through the trees. Then just past midnight, the sound came. A single toll, gong. The bell tower shuddered, though no rope hung from it. The sound rolled down the mountain, heavy as thunder. We froze, staring up. Through the cracks in the boards, a faint orange glow flickered inside the church, as if candles burned on the altar. But the doors remained chained, rust thick on the locks. We should have left. Instead, curiosity pushed us closer. My friend pressed his ear to the wood. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then whispers. Dozens of them, rising from the dark inside, chanting in unison. He stumbled back pale, saying they spoke his name. The bell tolled again. This time, the graves trembled. I swear I saw earth shift as if something below pushed upward. One stone cracked in half with a sharp snap. The glow inside the church flared, shadows twisting against the boards like hands pressed against glass. We ran, crashed down the trail, branches whipping, hearts pounding with every toll behind us. The sound followed, rolling down the hills, shaking the ground until we burst into the valley below. At dawn, we returned with others. The church stood dark, silent. The bell tower still, boards nailed tight. But the graveyard showed fresh dirt mounded at more than one stone. The old caretaker wouldn't step closer than the tree line. He just muttered, "That bell ain't rung for the living in a long, long time." Some nights, if you drive through that valley, you can still hear it, low, mournful, tolling across the mountains. And when it rings, folks say the dead walk the hill again.